Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Leaders across the country speak out against hate crimes following Sunday's devastating attack in Ontario. Plus, Jason Kenney says there's less demand for a first dose of the COVID vaccine, and this could slow down his open for summer plans. And we hear the heartwarming tale of a man who got his smile back.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News.
Thanks for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and other leaders are condemning the vehicle attack that killed 4 family members and left a 9-year-old boy in hospital, with the Prime Minister calling it a cowardly terrorist attack that was motivated by hate. Police have said the family members were targeted because of their Muslim faith.
3 generations of the Afzul family, Salman, Madia, their children Yumna and Fayaz, and their grandmother. But unlike every other night, that family never made it home. Their lives were taken in a brutal, cowardly, and brazen act of violence. This killing was no accident. This was a terrorist attack motivated by hatred in the heart of one of our communities. We not only have to say enough is enough, we must take action.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh expressed his anger and disappointment that the hate-inspired attack was not the first to happen in Canada and said it likely will not be the last.
The reality is this is our Canada. This is our Canada. Our Canada is a place where 215 little kids were found dead in unmarked graves. Our Canada is a place where you can't walk down the streets if you wear a hijab because you will be killed. This is our Canada. We can't deny it. We can't reject that because it does no one any help. The reality is our Canada is a place of racism, of violence, of genocide of Indigenous people, and our Canada is a place where Muslims aren't safe. They aren't. They aren't safe. Muslims are not safe in this country.
Meanwhile, Green leader Annamie Paul is calling for a national anti-Islamophobia strategy in the wake of the London attack. Paul says all Canadians can call out hate whenever they see it amid a spike in hate-motivated incidents.
Silence emboldens hate. Because there is usually an arc and a trajectory to hate crimes and to actions that culminate in a hate crime, and they often begin in words. They often begin in words that have not been challenged, whether it is on social media, whether it is in our parliament, whether it is in our community. So silence emboldens hate, and one concrete action that every single person in Canada can take today without any legislation, without a national strategy, is to call out the hate whenever they hear it, whenever they see it, to show solidarity with communities that are experiencing tremendous spikes in hate over the last year.
Premier Jason Kenney says his government is tired of making equalization payments to other provinces, but wants to know how Albertans feel about it. This is when billions of dollars from the resources of richer provinces, like Alberta's oil and gas, get transferred to other provinces. Kenney says Alberta's generosity is often met with hostility in the East, so he's announced that Albertans will have a say on these equalization payments by putting a referendum on the next ballot in the next provincial election.
Most Albertans I've spoken with about this issue say that they don't mind helping out their fellow Canadians. In fact, they're proud and have always been willing to share in a spirit of patriotism and generosity when times are good here and bad elsewhere. But when our generosity is met with hostility to our largest job-creating industry, and when the politicians who benefit from the hard work and resources of Alberta turn around and cut us off at the knees, blocking pipelines and imposing policies that damage our economy, well, that's where Albertans will draw the line.
Kenney says he's introduced a motion in the legislature asking Albertans if this section of the Constitution should be removed.
The clearest most conclusive way to determine how the majority of Albertans feel about their current role within Confederation and this province's economic future is to ask them directly. And so, later today, I will introduce a motion in the legislature seeking approval for the following question to be put to a referendum this fall. Quotes, should Section 36(2) of the Constitution Act 1982, Parliament and the Government of Canada's commitment to the principle of making equalization payments, be removed from the Constitution, unquote.
And in other news, Premier Kenney says the province is noticing there is less demand from people for a first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. He says that could lead to a longer wait for the province to fully reopen. Kenney says there are 100,000 bookings over the next 7 days, but 115,000 more people need to get their first shot to hit the 70% threshold to reopen 2 weeks later. He says people who have been holding back from getting a vaccine should consider getting one now. On June 10th, the province will go into stage 2 of Alberta's Open for Summer plan, meaning gyms and movie theaters will once again be able to open. According to Alberta Health, 3 new deaths due to COVID-19 have been reported in the past 24 hours. The deaths occurred in people between the ages of 48 and 68. There were 139 new cases of the virus reported. 336 people are in hospital, with 85 of them in ICU. 3.1 million doses of the vaccine have now been administered, meaning 67% of Albertans aged 12 and over have had at least one dose, and 15% of our province is fully vaccinated. An Edmonton pastor who was arrested and jailed for breaking COVID restrictions had his charter challenge dismissed Monday. Pastor James Coates of Grace Life Church is being represented by lawyers with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. John Carpe with the JCCF joins me now to talk about the case. John, Pastor Coates had his charter challenge dismissed. Why?
Well, seems the judge doesn't understand first-year constitutional law, which says that there are 2 steps to this process. Firstly, the government, firstly, the court has to determine whether charter rights and freedoms were violated, and secondly, as a very separate process, the court is supposed to rule on whether that violation of charter rights and freedoms is demonstrably justified with compelling evidence in a free and democratic society. And what the judge did was he said, well, I think that the government's health orders are reasonable, and therefore the charter rights are not violated. He seems to completely misunderstand that there's a very separate process there.
And what was your reaction when the judge ruled this way?
I'm just extremely surprised as well as disappointed. Sometimes you get a court ruling and you kind of think, well, it could go either way, and you might be disappointed but not really surprised. But here I'm very disappointed, but I'm just incredibly surprised. The violations of our charter rights and freedoms are obvious. And again, people will have different opinions on whether those violations are justified, but that's a separate issue.
So what's the next step in this court process for Pastor Coates and the JCCF? My understanding is the next court date is June 30th.
We are in touch with Pastor Coates, and we're looking at appealing this decision because it is so appalling.
That was John Carpe with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. Last year, Lethbridge saw its first ever cases of Dutch elm disease. The disease is spread by a fungus carried by elm bark beetles from one elm tree to another. Parks Operations Manager Hiroshi Okubo presented to the Civic Works Standing Policy Committee meeting Tuesday afternoon. He says he plans to hire 2 additional inspectors to educate the community on the causes and effects of the disease to keep Lethbridge Dutch elm free.
Back in 1998 was the first case in Alberta. It was in Wainwright. And at that time, they removed the tree and got rid of the tree. And they haven't seen Dutch elm disease in that community since. We were the next community to see it. That was last year, July of last year. We took the 2 trees down and we buried the trees. And hopefully it's similar to Wainwright, where the cases go away and we would still be considered Dutch elm free.
The city has approximately 6,000 publicly owned elms with a value of $27 million. They account for 1/3 of Lethbridge's canopy. Seniors play a huge role in our lives, and June 7th through 13th marks Seniors Week to honor those who paved the way before us. As Micah Quinn reports, a Tabor organization was out at seniors' homes today to hand out goodie bags to our most vulnerable.
Surprise! Hi, it's Seniors Week.
A little knock at the door can mean the world to a senior. Members of the Family and Community Support Services in Tabor made their way to seniors' homes today to give out bags filled with treats.
So in that bag is resources from the Alberta government on seniors financial assistance. We have our counseling information for mental health support. There's some fun things like a magnet, a stress ball. We have some exercise information for physical fitness, some pen and paper, and just a few other little treats in there to brighten their day.
In the past, the FCSS would have had a huge event to celebrate seniors, but due to the pandemic, the organization changed things around.
They're such an important part of our community. They're such an important part of the fabric of our lives. They've got so much wisdom, so many stories, and so much to share with us. So it's very important that we do bring recognition to them. Also, it's one of those things where they maybe haven't gotten out very much, and so they might be having feelings of isolation or loneliness, and it's really important for us to let them know that we're here and that they can contact us, that they can reach us whenever they need, and that we are here to support them.
Jean Sawinski says it's nice to feel appreciated during Seniors Week, especially when so many events have been canceled in the past year.
Well, it's nice to have Senior Week. We used to celebrate it in Parkside Manor Senior Center, and I used to look after that. And now that seeing this COVID-19 spoiled everything, we can't have it anymore. But it's really nice to celebrate Senior Week for the seniors. They really enjoy it.
The Family and Community Support Services in Tabor provide preventative programs for families, children, and seniors. They support Lethbridge County, County of Warner, and the MD of Tabor, offering free counseling to residents within their municipalities. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Thank you, Micah. Yesterday on Bridge City News, we heard the story of a Calgary man who was ridiculed his entire life because of his teeth. Fed up with the criticism and bullying, he fundraised money to have his teeth replaced with dentures. BCN's Naveen Day has part 2 of that story.
47-year-old Paul Bennett of Calgary has not smiled in over 10 years due to being ridiculed over the appearance of his teeth.
People have driven by and said to me, "Oh, nice car you have," and then turned around and said to me things like, "Why didn't you take that money and put it into your teeth?"
I just thought how sad it is that people tend to judge before they actually get to know the person, and Paul's a great guy. If you can just look past that, hey, he might have bad teeth, but we don't know his circumstance.
Through personal fundraising, he has been able to purchase dentures and is about to have them put in by Dr. Lynn Lee. She says his story was so touching, she has a big surprise for him before he gets his new smile.
We're so inspired by your story and what you've been through that we're going to step it up and we're going to do this for free.
Wow. Thanks.
You've caused a good rippling effect of kindness. You're an amazing man, and I am so inspired by you. I am so inspired by you. We decided to do the procedure for free for him because we know times are tough, and he's been saving up so much, and he told us that his son even saved up to help contribute to his procedure. We just thought we could do it and help him out, and he doesn't have to wait any longer, and we didn't want finance or us to be a reason of him to not get it now.
And when Paul sees his new set of pearly whites, he and his girlfriend can barely contain themselves.
Got some teeth there. They're nice and white and straight. How does he look?
You look great. It looks amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yep, it's gonna be amazing.
Bennett says the first meal that he's going to test his new chompers out on will consist of shish kebab and corn on the cob. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Thank you, Naveen. It's such a touching story. And you can watch that full story along with footage not included in our newscast online at bridgecitynews.ca, as well as our Facebook and Twitter pages. With the pandemic forcing many to work from home over the past year, owning a furry companion has been on the rise. Animal rescues around Lethbridge say pets are continuing to be adopted by new owners. As Carson Marzouk explains, a local pet store is welcoming the increase.
During the course of the pandemic, animal adoptions have been on the rise, and with a new pet comes new toys and accessories. A local pet store in Lethbridge has been enjoying the surge in new pets over the last year.
When the pandemic first hit, there was a huge surge in how many puppies were being adopted. So it was quite fun to see all the new parents coming in and needing all the accessories, new toys, leashes, collars, pee pads, all the accessories.
Stewart says now that we're over a year into the pandemic, they are still continuing to see the same number of customers as they were this time last year.
We're holding pretty steady, and especially coming into summer now again, we're starting to see more people are needing more new accessories for their dogs, whether it's a new puppy that's growing up through summer now, or whether it's an older dog and people want to go on more adventures.
However, with the added increase of new furry friends, keeping supplies in stock has been difficult.
It hasn't been too bad. It's been a brand here or there, like a certain canned food line that's been hard to bring in.
Lethbridge Animal Services says animal adoptions have continued to hold strong, with a new way of showing animals to the public being developed.
Moving forward, as these public health restrictions relax, we may sort of keep some of those processes that we've started as far as adoptions, because again, we've actually found it's probably helped get the animals into more suitable homes.
Animal Services says the return of pets have not changed over the last year. For Bridge City News, I'm Carson Marzouk.
The Lethbridge Animal Shelter wants to remind people to do their research when looking to adopt a pet and to prepare for the time and financial commitment. Well, we had some light showers today. After the break, I'll tell you how much more rain is in the forecast. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, it looks like that rain's going to be sticking around for just a little while anyway, as we have another 30% chance of it this evening. Here's the good news, though. Only 20 km/h winds this evening. Into tomorrow, though, that is going to change 20 to 40 km/h gusts. A heavy downpour tomorrow as well on Wednesday. We could see 10 to 20 millimeters of rain and a risk of an afternoon thunderstorm as well. 17 degrees the high tomorrow. Into Thursday, periods of rain continuing. 14 degrees the high before warming up and the sun will come out. By Friday, we're looking at a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 22. Beautiful weekend ahead of us, though. 23 on Saturday with lots of sunshine before climbing even further to 27 degrees for a Sunday and a Monday. So should be a pretty lovely weekend ahead of us. 21 degrees is the average high for this time of year. 8 degrees the average low. 33 was our high temperature back in 1948. Back in 1999, we had our lowest day on record, which was -1. 5:25 is when the sun woke up this morning, and our sunset this evening 9:36 p.m. So giving us those long days of daylight. Over on the west coast tomorrow, we are looking at a chance of showers in both Vancouver and Victoria. 18 degrees the high for both of those cities. Now in Calgary, we're looking at a 60% chance of showers in the morning. Should be clearing up by the afternoon. 17 degrees the high there. 19 in Edmonton. Edmonton just the opposite. Looking at those showers developing into the afternoon there. Quite rainy in the rest of the prairies as well. 25 degrees the high in Saskatoon with showers. Showers also in Regina with a high of 23. These cities also getting some wind gusts up to 40 km/h and 50 km. 25 in Winnipeg. Winnipeg very humid. Those accumulating into the risk of a thunderstorm tomorrow. 30 degrees the high in Toronto with a chance of showers. Showers also expected in Ottawa tomorrow. Look at these temperatures though. 31. Montreal 29. Lots of sunshine. Also expecting a bit of a heat warning there in those areas. Same thing with the East Coast. The heat warning is in effect for Fredericton, Halifax, Charlottetown, particularly Fredericton and Halifax, rather. 27 degrees the high in Fredericton, 25 in Halifax, 18 in Charlottetown, a chance of showers, and a lovely sunny day tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland with a high of 15 degrees. So there you go. That is your weather forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you by Jeff Reimer of Royal LePage South Country Real Estates, 403-380-1779.
The World Bank is predicting that COVID-19 vaccinations and massive government stimulus in rich countries will power the fastest worldwide economic expansion in nearly 5 decades. In its latest Global Economic Prospects report, the agency forecasts that the world economy will grow 5.6% this year. That's up from the 4.1% it forecast in January. The projected expansion would make 2021 the fastest year of growth since 1973. It's become apparent how critical a handful of companies running the internet's plumbing have become. A global glitch occurred Tuesday when multiple websites went offline briefly around the world after an outage at the cloud service company Fastly.
It's really, really important for everyone who depends on them to make sure they know what happens to their business, what happens to their business process if they have to fall back to an alternate or a contingent plan. It turns out that these types of outages, whether they're accidental or whether they're malicious, if you remember attacks like in 2016, we had the Dyn DNS attack that was a DDoS attack. These are the same kinds of things that can happen. Lots and lots and lots of applications and services all depend on a couple of these big providers, all operating appropriately, operating successfully all the time.
And now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 30 points to 20,066. The Dow was down 30.42 to 34,600. The S&P 500 was up 74 cents to 4,227. The Nasdaq was up 43 points to 13,925. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 82 cents to 70.05 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 6 cents to 3.13 US. Gold was up 18 cents to 18.93 US an ounce. Silver was up slightly to finish at 27.63 US an ounce. Wheat is at $347 per metric ton. Barley is at $352. Canola is at $776. Canola is at $414 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 50 cents to $116.73. Feeder cattle were down 95 cents to $149.25. Lean hogs were up 80 cents to $120.70. And the Canadian dollar was up slightly to 82.57 US.
Recapping one of our top stories today, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says 115,000 more people need to get their first shot of COVID-19 vaccine if the final stage of the province's reopening plan is to go ahead later this month. The province has said stage 3, which could happen as early as June 24th, would see all health restrictions lifted. That's as long as 70% of Albertans 12 and over have had received at least one shot. Kenney said the province is ready to go ahead with the second phase of reopening on Thursday. After the break, we chat with our foreign affairs expert who discusses how the world has changed regarding hate crimes and particularly anti-Semitic attacks. Keep it right here. As much of North America, particularly the U.S., is easing up on restrictions and getting back to normal, still little is known about the origin of the virus that sent the entire world into lockdown mode. But there are some theories as more people are coming forward to disclose information. Joining me to discuss this and much more is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, welcome back. So great to have you back.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So what do we know so far about what's been leaked about the origin of the coronavirus?
You notice the question you asked was leaked. Why should there be this, a clandestine operation to get information that transparency, the truth out about this virus that affected the whole world. Why did this become a political game? Why did it become hide and go seek? So, as many people know, there was a FOIA request. That's a Freedom of Information Act. We have that here in the United States when you could request information, particularly when they are employees of the government, that their records should be open and declassified. And through these emails that Dr. Fauci received, we are understanding that he did not go and and delve further to find the origins, or he knew more about the origins and stop the investigations right there. And that's what a lot of people are pressing on right now. Others obviously don't want to hear this, and that's the hard part here, is to say that we live at a time where half the country here in the United States, and I'm sure Canada has a similar situation, just shuts down questions and conversation and dialogue and investigations, and they prevent the truth from coming out. And in this case, look, we had the virus. Obviously, it hit hard all around the world. I know many people who have loved ones who perished in this awful pandemic. So we don't make light of it at all. It obviously existed, and it was something that was horrific. But people want to know where this came from. Why didn't we look further? Why wasn't there a more committed drive to get to the bottom of this, to get to the truth of this? And why was it blocked? What was the agenda in blocking this information? And that's what we all have to press on. That's what we all have to stay on top of. I know as a journalist, even though this is not my area of expertise, I certainly will stay on top of it in order to at least ask the proper questions in hopes of getting some answers.
Interesting stuff. So let's switch gears a little bit here to the recent cyber attacks on some major businesses. Now, Lisa, where I am in Alberta, we're only about an hour and 40 minutes from one of the largest meat packing plants in the region. JBS, of course, is what I'm talking about. And just like the ones in the US, the plant here was forced to shut down temporarily last week after a ransomware attack. Now, this is serious, and apparently the U.S. Department of Justice is treating this with a similar priority as terrorism.
As they should. And you know what? They are a bit late on this, because rogue nations like China, like Iran's government, like Russia, are spending more money on their cyber militaries than they are on their actual militaries. And that should tell us a big warning for the future of attacks. Attacks will be online because they know they can take out an entire infrastructure, or a basic, what we had here in the United States just a month or so ago was the pipeline that was hacked similarly. Imagine them taking down power grids. Imagine them taking down Wall Street and hospitals. I mean, the endless possibilities of the important infrastructures that rely on obviously the web and a secure system, and how easily they can be hacked, how easily there could be a ransomware with these types of attacks that take place. That's why it's very important that the Biden administration and all governments really take a serious position on this to prevent them from happening again. They need to dig very, very deeply. They believe that this is Russia. They believe that this is similar to the attack that was on the oil pipeline here in the United States. So start digging and start getting some answers as to who this was. Punish them, hold their government really accountable until you get answers as to who this was and what they want, and they should stop right immediately.
Yeah, it's really, really scary stuff. And of course, speaking of attacks, we seem to be seeing a rise in anti-Semitism in the U.S., including groups like the Women's March and Black Lives Matter, who are in support of pro-Palestinian activists. And this is helping to legitimize anti-Semitism, isn't it?
Yeah, how did we get here, right? Jeanette, you're talking about, conflict between Hamas, a terrorist organization, and the state of Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, and obviously our Western ally. And all of a sudden that trickles into, attacks on people eating at restaurants in New York and Los Angeles, or having protests where people are beaten in the streets in Canada and Europe, and of course here in the United States as well. We saw a few of those incidents. It's horrific, but it's by design. design. This is not something that just happened overnight. Anti-Semitic attacks have been on the rise in 2019 and 2020, exponentially rising in major cities across the world. And now this recent conflict in the Middle East is just pretense for more of this violence, not just against Israel or against people who are pro-Israel, but against Jews. So they've really made a skip, right? They're not asking, well, do you believe in Israel's policies or do you support the state of Israel? They're saying, are you Jewish? When they walk up to these people in restaurants, they're asking, are you Jewish? So it's purely anti-Semitic. And again, with these social justice groups that you mentioned, the pro-Palestinian narrative here in the West has done a masterful job at backing on these social justice movements, taking advantage of this intersectionality. So they tell people, well, if you believe in gay rights, then you should believe in Palestinian rights. And if you believe in women's rights, then you should believe in Palestinian rights. And if you believe in Black rights, then you should believe in Palestinian rights. And not really flipping that and saying, well, if you believe in all those things, you should also believe in stopping anti-Semitism and every form of hate. So the narrative is really flipped on its head, and we do our best to try to comb through this and really set the narrative straight. But unfortunately, you have so many of these, Instagram celebrities and influencers who are spewing garbage, and people are learning from Instagram and TikTok rather than actually getting the facts. We live in a day and age where, of course, you can get these so-called facts from memes and influencers on social media, but we also live in a time where you can Google everything, the history of the region, the history of Israel, the history of anti-Semitism, to better inform yourselves of these very, very serious issues.
Now, and as I understand it, the Women's March has also used its large Twitter platform to spread these narratives. But Lisa, isn't it ironic considering women's rights under Hamas's rule are almost non-existent compared to that of Israel's?
Exactly right. Exactly right. You look at the statistics in universities in Israel, you look at the statistics of women, leaders in Israel. They've had a prime minister who is a woman. You have members of the parliament that are women. Obviously, look at the Arabs that are living inside Israel, who are so much happier than the ones that are living under Hamas. I mean, that's a no-brainer, right? And you talk about other rights. How about the gay rights? The only country in the Middle East that allows gay marriage and has a gay pride parade is the state of Israel. Try being gay in Gaza. I mean, I don't think it'll fare well for anyone who believes in those rights and believes in supporting those marginalized groups. So yeah, this is all flipped on its head. And these social justice groups should really come to their senses before they drive away a lot of supporters who understand that this is a very dangerous path that they're on.
That's a really interesting point you make. Now, Lisa, we've also heard that a major department head at Google posted some comments that were anti-Semitic, but they're still staying with the company. Seems like under other circumstances, people would be gone.
Oh, absolutely. You know what? Cancel culture applies to everything except for anti-Semitism, I guess, right? You can't say anything about any other group. The comment that this man made, if you took out the word Jews and you put in, any other minority group, this guy would have been out. And what they did was they removed him from his one post as the head of diversity. Obviously, he has no right, being anywhere near the word diversity. But he didn't lose his job, meaning he's still with the company. And I think that headline was misleading to a lot of people who said, "Oh, thank goodness Google removed him." No, they only removed him from this one position, but he is still with the company. And I think people should continue to press that if cancel culture is going to apply for some things, it should apply for all things that are hateful, that are insightful, and in this case, purely anti-Semitic and filled with hate.
Now, moving beyond the U.S. borders, Hamas has warned Israel that it would restart protests at the Gaza border if Qatari funds were not allowed to come into the Gaza Strip. So what kind of ties does this warning prove to be between Hamas and Qatar? What has Qatar been saying the funds are for?
Right. So it doesn't bode well for the ceasefire, right? When you have Hamas one side of the ceasefire saying, "Look, we're going to start up again if you don't let us, get this money." And I tweeted this out. They basically are saying, "Let us get our terrorism money, or else we're going to terrorize you." So it's really this catch-22 that Israel finds itself in, where obviously Qatar has been supporting, Gaza and the Palestinian territories for a long time now. Qatar has been on the wrong side of many conflicts in the Middle East, and they've been called out by the U.S. several times for this and for their financing of terror. Likewise, the Iranian regime has doubled down and said we're going to replenish Hamas's weapons that they use in this this recent conflict against Israel. So we know that they're getting, all of this help and support. Meanwhile, the Democrats here in the United States today voted unanimously to not give Israel the money that they need to fix the Iron Dome. Again, that's the technology that protects Israel from the missiles coming into the country. So, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and a lot of the narrative has been shifted completely from where we need to be and where we have been for so many decades on this conflict in particular. But it's really horrific when it comes from the White House or it comes from the government, and you're saying, how do we even get to the root of this to correct the narrative?
Yeah, for sure. And of course, speaking of the White House, Vice President Kamala Harris visiting Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, pledging $310 million in humanitarian aid in an attempt to stem a wave of migration from these countries. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, what took her so long? She got this position as, handling the crisis on the border, from almost the beginning of the Biden presidency, and we haven't seen her make any trips or make any mention of this position till now. We know that it's a crisis; it's an ongoing crisis, and it seemed like more of a crisis when Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were campaigning than when they actually came into the White House. It no longer became as much of a crisis. The same thing with the media. We're not seeing as much of the pictures of the children and the ones that are separated from their families and the ones that are crying and are going to basically become orphaned. It's horrific. It's horrific no matter who's in the White House. But we like to see consistency. If you cried out about the children under Trump, you should cry out about the children under Joe Biden. And Kamala Harris, when she got there, well, she didn't get such a warm and friendly welcome from the Guatemalans. She actually got a lot of boos and signs that said Trump won the election, and the message there being that they blame Joe Biden for the current crisis at the border. It was not a friendly welcome. You can read this at the New York Post had a great spread on this just a few hours ago. So, this is at least some people are watching and realizing what's going on and seeing what the truth is. And look, immigration and foreign policy, two of the topics that we covered here today together, Jeanette, are and should be nonpartisan issues, meaning we look at them in the way that they affect our national security. And if the people can come in safely, and if we can absorb them economically, and we can get them jobs and housing and all of that. Same thing goes for foreign policy. You look at a situation and think, how can our assets be safe, both here and abroad? And instead, everything has become politicized. Even the COVID vaccine that the COVID pandemic that we talked about at the top of the segment, everything has become politicized, and it's very difficult to get the truth when the truth is so, smeared in order to get a political point across. And that's, these are the challenges that we're facing right now, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting how the vice president is making these travels, yet she's been absent from the border area of Mexico and the U.S. And of course, we're hearing those heartbreaking stories of migrants barely able to make it across the Rio Grande. And of course, the children, as you mentioned, that really seem to be suffering here.
Yes, I mean, look, the pictures tell it all, and I know that a lot of politicians, Ted Cruz and others, have made the trip down to the border in order to see it for themselves, in order to take pictures, in order to tell the media, whoever's listening, because the media here isn't exactly on the right side at all times. So it's difficult to tell the truth, and our hearts go out to these families. I mean, if there's a safe way for them to come, they should come. Obviously, I'm the daughter of immigrants, so I understand the desire to come to this country. I get it. And I never want to sound like a hypocrite, but it has to be under, a system where we can vet these individuals so both sides are safe, so we can vet the situation so that they come in safely, so that they're not separated from their children, so that they're not getting diseases and getting COVID and getting raped. There's a story 2 nights ago about a woman who was getting raped, and authorities got there in time. It's horrific. And you know what, when people talk about these issues, again, hopefully we can get to a place where we're talking about it from a nonpartisan point of view and looking out for the best interest of everyone involved.
Absolutely. Looks like we are about out of time, but Lisa, thank you so much for being with us once again today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, being a parent is a challenge in the best of times, but with the middle of COVID restrictions, that challenge seems to get a lot harder. Joining us today to discuss this is Gary Mason, pastor of Medicine Hat Family Church. Welcome to Bridge City News, Pastor Gary.
Awesome. Great to be with you. Thanks.
Absolutely. So are you hearing from parents in your community that COVID restrictions and kids having to stay home, not getting to socialize with friends, that it's causing more tensions in families?
Yeah, totally. I mean, when you think about it, I like to think a lot of times from a biblical perspective, being a pastor of a Christian church and everything. And so I think all the way back to Genesis, when God first created man, and he makes this statement, we always use it when it comes to marriage, but it really applies to everything, that it's not good for man to be alone. We were created for relationship. And when that gets limited, that causes problems. And our own mental health, let alone our children and what they're going through, the stress of all of that has created lots of issues for people, for sure.
Yeah, totally. Now, what advice do you have for parents to handle the conflicts that might be coming up with their children these days? Typically, we'll see raised voices, sarcasm, disrespect, etc. So what advice do you have?
Yeah, well, it comes back to relationship a lot of times. And are we building those relationships with our children? A lot of times, I suppose in the past, we all got so busy that things were going on. And sometimes even we had teachers and I like teachers, so not against all of that, but teachers, coaches, we left the raising of our children to them. And we didn't get involved in our own children's lives. And so I think that we have to make sure that we're maintaining relationship, we're maintaining conversations. I also think that we've lost the art of conversation in our society. We have cancel culture and all of that going on that people talk about and different things. But a lot of times we've lost the art of conversation, being able to listen with respect and speak with respect, right? And so within our homes, we should be creating an environment where we can have those conversations, and it can be a safe spot for our children to talk and everything, and keep those lines of communication with your children open, no matter what their ages. You got to keep that open. And especially as they get into their teenage and adolescent years, that's really important. So
I like that, open communication. And of course, when communication is open, of course, maybe things are going to come out that the truth comes out sometimes. So apologies can be key, right? And forgiveness. So is there a poor way and a better way to apologize?
Sure. There's always one of the things that I try to do with we have 4 boys, and they're all from 16 to 22. And so as we've talked to them over the years, we try to get them to just accept responsibility in the apology. If you got to apologize and justify what you're saying, then the other person then takes it oftentimes as an attack on them again. And so what you want to do is just straight up take responsibility for your part of it. Even if you weren't to blame, maybe you weren't wrong in how it was done, but they felt wronged. They felt like, and so sometimes you have to apologize and just say, you know what, at least I'm sorry. I didn't mean for that to come across that way. And so just take responsibility. If you're always justifying, then how much responsibility are you really taking? And that's a big deal in the conversation.
Very good advice. Now, teens and young adults, screen time is always up in their lives. But of course, during COVID time, social media use has risen even more significantly, hasn't it? So what would you say to parents as to how to set boundaries when it comes to screen time or social media use?
Well, I think it's twofold in some of that. Number one is, are we checking the boundaries in our own life? And then are we talking about the boundaries with our kids, which goes back to relationship and conversation and talking to them, not just telling them here's the boundary, but telling them why the boundary's there. And there's lots of information online about the struggle that comes when there's too much screen time and what that does to us. And so to be able to stop and sit down and have that conversation, say, This is because I care about your own mental health and some of those things, and talking to them about, even as they grow and mature, and sleep patterns and overnight and all of those things, when flashes are coming on your phone and staying up all night, this doesn't help them with good development in their own process of whether it be mental health, physical health, all of that. And so to begin to talk about those boundaries, but to also display them in our own lives. Our house, at a certain time every night, the Wi-Fi goes off, and my Wi-Fi goes off as well as their Wi-Fi goes off, because the truth is that if that's true for their mental health, it's true for my mental health. And so we try to do those kind of things and have those conversations, apply the same things to our own lives and whatever. There's always exceptions, right?
Yeah.
One night you might stay up a little bit later and do some things, but
Right.
there's certain things that we can do. And that's sometimes that's a difficult conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but leading by example, it's very smart. It's hard to do, though.
It is, because it's easy for us to get drawn in. I mean, social media is, we know now that a lot of it was designed actually to draw us in and to create almost an addiction within us, and all of that. And there's lots of studies for all of that, so you can find that. But if you understand that, then you understand that I need to keep it in a place where it's not controlling me. And so if I do that for me, and I display that to my kids, and I tell them about the importance of that for both of us, then that helps.
That's very, very smart. Now, I think it's a given that your kids are likely to disagree with your boundaries, right? I'm not talking just about your kids, Gary, everybody's kids. They don't like those boundaries sometimes, even though they need them. So any practical tips on how to communicate effectively with your kids, with kids in general, on
totally.
issues like this?
Yeah, totally. I think that's a great question, because a lot of people, they have those struggles, but that's where being a parent comes in, and not just being a friend, not just being, and that's a longer conversation, I'm sure. But the reality is we still have to direct and help. At certain stages, when my children were 3, then it was, don't touch the stove, it's hot. And I'd pull them away, and there was no question, there was no conversation. But as they grow, you have to begin to treat them differently. You have to begin to tell them why you're making these decisions. You have to begin to tell them not only why they're making the decision, but then give them an opportunity to make the decision and correct it if they're wrong, so that when the time comes and you're not around, they know how to make the right decisions, right? And so it's a process that goes. Now, if you haven't done that ahead of time, or you don't have that kind of a relationship with your children, I think you need to step back and begin to build that relationship. And always, there's a book that was written years ago. I think it was John Trent, I'm not sure. But he wrote a book called The 2% Difference. And it talks about, rather than making big, wide changes, let's just make a 2% change today until we have that, and then make a 2% change in a week or two, or a month, or whatever. And as you slowly move the needle over, you're going to change things over time, rather than doing something that's just, it's too hard on everybody.
Now, Gary, I might be old-fashioned, but is it still key for kids to play sports, or out at the park, or maybe some board games, even if it's just with their siblings or a small group of friends outdoors?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's old-fashioned myself. I think it probably depends. I suppose if you all decided to go out and churn butter, that would be old-fashioned. But that's not what we're talking about. And so playing a board game or playing a video, sometimes, like every family day at our family, we play one on a Nintendo, I think it is. We played a Mario and whatever Olympics as a family, right? And then we do other things that day as well. But so we have this tradition that we've done on that day. And there are other days we might do something else. And sometimes we go for motorcycle rides. We all ride and stuff. And so I think
your
that
kids
it's
are
not
older, so they can do that.
right.
Yeah.
But but we played video games when they were younger. Now we do motorcycle rides now, but even when they were younger, they would sit on the back, right? So yeah, you have different things that you can do along the way. It's only old fashioned if what you're doing is old fashioned. The fact of spending time together will never be old fashioned. That's important for all of us, especially within the home, and especially right now when sometimes you're limited to your home. But getting out to the park as well with friends and having some time with them, outside, I think the limit right now is 10 people in a group. And so to be able to do that, that's really important as well, because they need that interaction. And you know what? I don't run with them like their friends run with them anymore. When they play football, I might play football with them, but I'm the guy that jogs now. I'm 51, so I'm the guy that jogs now. And so they need those guys around them too, and they need those relationships too. So
That's awesome. So a big part of parenting is the process of passing your faith on to your children, if you are a person of faith, of course. So how can we do this effectively?
I think at that point you've got to talk about living it out in front of them. I think you've got to allow what you believe to be seen in them and discuss it with them. Again, if I want to transfer something to them, I got to talk about it. I've got to then live it out and be real in front of them. If I'm struggling, as they get older, I even talk to them about my struggles and things, and as well as all the victories and all of that along the way. And so just allowing yourself to be real, allowing yourself to have that relationship and growing it with them. So
That's awesome. Now, with that said, how important is it for families to be part of a local church in order to thrive spiritually?
yeah, well, I'm a pastor, so I believe in the power of the local church, right? But I think community is really huge, and when you have a community that is working towards the same goal, like growing as Christians and reaching out and evangelizing, having what would you call it, compassion ministries within your community, feeding the hungry or clothing those who are poor, doing all those things, is reaching out in different parts of the world. Whatever it is that we're doing within the church and within those things, being together, doing that together with other people is really important. Actually, we've homeschooled our boys for a number of years, and one of the things that's really interesting in some of my studies of that was that the only time they spend all their time with people of their age is in school. As soon as you graduate school, you go to college, you get a career, you're in a job, you're with people of all different age groups. And so one of the things that you find is that if all they ever do is spend time with their age group, they actually lack certain identity strengths. They will have at times even identity crisis that they go through because they don't know who they are. Whereas when you get them into a larger group, a larger community with adults and everything, and those adults then endorse them and speak into their lives and have those conversations as well, adult endorsement for those young people brings more strength to their identity than their peers does.
That's amazing. And it's one of those things that you might not think about because, they tend to hang out with people of their own age group. But that is really
and
good advice.
And when you talk about family time and you talk about sharing your faith, what better way than to do that within the context of whether it be worship or listening to the word that's being preached or prayer and all of those things. Those are really intimate times. I think I don't think enough believers recognize the value of the local church. As a matter of fact, my 16-year-old, I shared a couple of the questions that we were going to go over today with a couple of my boys today. And my 16-year-old said, to this question, he said, I don't think people realize the importance of that. And he's 16.
Wow. Spoken from the teen right there. Wisdom. We can learn from them, can't we?
Oh man, I learn from them so much all the time. And today's world is different than our world. We can't look at it and say, well, why aren't you like me? Or why,
Yeah.
man, it's just a totally different world, like it was for us with our parents.
Yeah, totally. So what do you say to parents who maybe feel that they've messed up already? It might be just too late for their kids at this point. Is it ever too late?
I don't think it's ever too late. I think that there's always opportunity. I'll admit that if you don't do it when they're young, or you did it really when they were young and treated them like they were 3 all the way till they were 23, then you have problems and there's things to overcome. But I think, again, you work on that 2-degree difference. You begin to make small changes in your relationship. You begin to reach out in ways until you build that relationship. Sometimes we see parents who want to really bring in a lot of controls and boundaries and do all that, but they don't have the relationship. Typically when somebody's telling somebody what to do and there's no relationship, a lot of times we could call that abuse even. And so certainly to a young person that can feel like that. So make sure you build the relationship. Just take time wherever you're at to begin to build that relationship.
What fantastic advice. Thanks so much for being with us today, Gary, and for passing on your wisdom and knowledge.
Well, it's been my pleasure. I'll tell anybody that I can, anything I can help them with. So praise the Lord.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Gary Mason is the pastor of Medicine Hat Family Church. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.